Right, good evening, everybody. It is just about time to start, so we will make a start. I think people are still joining us as I speak. So, first of all, just a very quick introduction. My name is Michelle Baxter, and I am one of the sessional trainers for the YMCA Trinity Group. In my other existence, I am a primary Senko and also a mother to two boys with neurodivergence. So I've got both personal and professional experience in the field. Not that to say that I'm an expert or that I know everything, but I'll certainly do my best to be informative for you tonight. And tonight I'm being very ably assisted by my glamorous assistant, Jackie. Would you like to introduce yourself, Jackie?
Hello. I'm Jackie Rout. I am also a trainer for the YMCA and have been working for them for several years now, ever since the YMCA brought on all of these mental health training services for the educational sector, which is great. So I've seen it grow and very pleased to be here tonight.
Hey, thank you, Jackie. And Jackie's going to be fielding the questions and the chat. So we're not going to be taking questions during the actual webinar itself, which I should also mention is being recorded, as you should have been told as you joined. Once we've finished the webinar part, I will stop recording and we will go into questions and answers then, where Jackie and I will do our very best to help you with anything that you wish to know. Okay, so we'll make a start. Once again, welcome. I hope you enjoy the evening. Okay, so just some workshop guidelines. Obviously, we're not meeting face to face, so mobile phones shouldn't really be a problem. However, if you could make sure that you stay muted unless you're asking a question in the question and answer section. Obviously, when we do have a discussion, and I hope it will be a discussion and a shared experience, please do remember that we've all got different experiences. So please, you know, if somebody's opinion doesn't quite match yours, then obviously please be respectful of that. Obviously, what is said at this webinar stays at this webinar. It needs to be confidential. We need to know that we can trust who we are speaking with, and that it won't be shared in any way. There are some difficult themes in this. It can raise some quite strong emotions through experience or just by considering what we're seeing and hearing. So if you do need to take a break, please do. I'm not going to lock the meeting, so you can come and go as you please. It may be easier for you if you just turn your camera off if you haven't already and just leave the room, or whatever you need to do. But make sure that you've got plenty to drink with you as well, and that you're looking after yourselves. If you do come up with any examples, obviously family notwithstanding, that is entirely your choice. Please don't give away details that might identify somebody else, obviously. And as I've said, we will be doing Q&A at the end of the session. Okay, so the learning objectives, it's like being back at school, I know, but the learning objectives are hopefully that you will understand the reasons behind sensory processing challenges, what's going on in the background. We're going to be looking at some of the behaviours that might be displayed during these challenges, and we're going to discuss why that you might see those behaviours, what's going on in the brain and so on. We are going to discuss some strategies that may help while your child is experiencing sensory processing difficulties. And we also need to understand that self-care is important and how to use self-soothe techniques with ourselves and our children. Jackie, I can see that we've got several raised hands already.
Yes, that's right. We have Martina, who has raised a hand, and I'm just wondering if there's a should they be putting things in the chat to raise a hand, or do you want them to?
If they're raising a hand because there's a problem, that's why I've paused.
Okay.
Just to make sure that there isn't a problem. Are you hearing and seeing things okay?
I'm just allowing Martina to speak.
Hi there. Sorry, I couldn't find any of it. I just wanted to make sure I was muted and the chat's disabled, so I couldn't message.
Oh, okay. Right.
So I'm on mute automatically. I can't find my settings. It's got a different view to what I'm used to. So as long as you mute me, that's brilliant.
Okay, I will mute you again now. No offense.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody should be automatically muted. You should be able to take yourselves off mute just to let you know. So it will be there somewhere, but obviously, unless you are asking a question, please remain muted. But don't worry that you might somehow not be on mute. If we do start hearing something, we'll investigate who it is and mute them, if you see what I mean. But thank you for checking. I do appreciate that.
I'm just aware that Martina said that the chat was disabled.
That one I am not sure about.
So
okay, hang on a sec. I hopefully have changed the setting there, which says that attendees can chat with everyone.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, I do apologise for that. I didn't even know that existed until now.
Thank you.
That's something I've learned as well. So thank you very much, Martina. That was really appreciated. Okay, so it wouldn't be a webinar without a few glitches, would it? So let's hope that that is the worst it gets. Okay, so right, just I won't dwell on this too much, but just so you know what the YMCA are up to in terms of mental health training and so on. This is more applying to schools and other settings, but it's just to give you an idea of the sort of things that we do. This course would fit into core, which is stage 1, so it's basically open to anyone that has anything to do with children. So that would be anybody within a school, including admin staff, support staff, caretakers, and so on, and of course parents. And then enhanced is teachers and TAs, parents still again. And then stage 3 are the ones that take the more specialist role with children with mental health difficulties or SEN of any kind. Okay, so we often talk about neurodivergence. You may also hear it referred to as neurodiversity as well. They're one and the same. This is one definition that gives an overview even. Neurodiversity covers a wide range of conditions. It's not just ASD and ADHD, which are mentioned there by Forbes. It also includes dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and actually even left-handedness is a neurodivergence. Okay, it literally just means brain difference. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to just read the definition for those of you that aren't already aware. Okay, so it is worth exploring what a trip to the local shops may be like from the point of view of a child who is experiencing sensory challenges and sensory input challenges. Some of you, of course, may well have experienced this firsthand. I know I did when my boys were little. So I'll just let it speak for itself.
7, 8, 9. Take my hand. I'm not naughty, I'm autistic, and I just get too much information.
Okay, so we saw several things that covered just about all of the emotions and senses there. The shoelace being undone will undoubtedly stay with him even after he's managed to calm down, because it's registered, it's there in his mind. And quite often children with sensory input difficulties will fixate on things. So things like the shoelace, the perfume would have been overwhelming for him, and that was without the coins being dropped on the floor, and so on. Okay, so we heard in the video just now that he says, I'm not naughty, I'm just autistic. But all too often, children are labelled as naughty because they are suffering sensory overload and they are experiencing meltdown. And children being labelled as naughty is never helpful. There's always a reason behind that behaviour. And so it's better to see behaviour as communication, because they are trying to communicate their needs in some way. And that's whether that behaviour is a hug or something that we'd rather wasn't happening. It's important to note at this point that although sometimes when a child is lashing out or what might be perceived as misbehaving, it can feel very personal, especially when it appears to be directed at us. But it is never personal, and it is never the result of so-called bad parenting. I know there are a lot of people, like the lady with the mobile phone in the video, who are quite quick to judge, and that can cause us to question ourselves and overanalyze what's happened. Is there something I could have done differently? Should I have done something differently? Where am I going wrong? But it really is the time to cut ourselves a bit of slack, and remembering that where there is challenging behaviour, there is a need. And it's not attention seeking, but connection seeking. As a parent, we're going to question ourselves, second guess ourselves, and we're going to second guess our decision, as I said just now. But always remember that you are doing the best you can for your child, and they're often complex needs. And after all, you're here today seeking answers as well, so that's a plus. You know, we're all doing our best in an increasingly sensory world. So hopefully today you will learn some tips and tricks that will help. It is a universal piece of advice. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately, because there are many different solutions, as there are people with neurodivergence, and each is an individual. So hopefully in the course of this you will find something that will help, and if not, I will also be introducing some tips and tricks for self-care to remind ourselves that we matter too. Okay, so before we explore the differences in sensory processing, it's important to first understand what is happening when a child goes into meltdown, like the little boy in the video. What happens when that sensory input is so great that they cannot cope, they cannot manage those behaviours themselves?
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, This is a very useful model of the brain, and when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up, representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain it to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
So, a meltdown occurs when a child does flip their lid. It should be said that at that point they are going to fight, flight, freeze, or faint mode. So actually, a meltdown may not be like on the video. It may not be a screaming, throwing things, not being able to, thrashing around. It may be that they go extremely quiet, extremely withdrawn, and just go almost into themselves as well. So it can look like either of those, or perhaps at times both. And it should be also noted that a meltdown is very different to a normal childhood tantrum. Neurodivergent children can have tantrums as well as meltdowns, but there's a big difference. The key ones being that if you are in meltdown, you have no sense of danger. You have no sense of danger to yourself or anybody else. You've got no sense of reward. So if you are throwing a tantrum, it may be because you want a particular reward out of it. The reward appears, the tantrum passes by and is a thing of the past. In a meltdown, the child cannot process what is going on around them, what is being said to them, or even what they are doing. They've got literally no awareness of anything. So at that point, communication and contact should be minimal, whilst ensuring that they and everyone else are safe. It's no good at all trying to go in, reason with them, talk them down at that point, because they won't hear you. Once the child has come out the other side, which can take quite a long time, they will be exhausted. It is exhausting experiencing full meltdown. And once they're calm, discussion can then take place about what may have caused it, what may have been the trigger. There's always going to be a trigger, whether we're aware of it or not. And unfortunately, with some neurodivergent children, it can be that it was something that happened 2 weeks ago that they've taken a long time to process, and then it has manifested itself because something has then reminded them of it or similar. Okay, so we're going to introduce the senses, and you may be wondering why I'm introducing the senses, because, hey, we've got 5 senses and we know what our senses are, right? Well, that's wrong. There aren't only 5 senses. There are actually 8, and they all play a large part when a child experiences challenges with sensory processing. So we've got the auditory sound, hearing, that we all know about. And obviously that goes without saying, it's what we do, it's noise. Then we've got the smell, man smelling his coffee there, which personally wouldn't be something I'd be particularly keen on. I don't like the smell of coffee, but there we are. That's by the by. Vision and sight, what we're seeing. Taste, so anything from sweet, sour, and so on. And touch, so you've got our usual 5 senses that we all know and love. Then you've got vestibular, or movement, which is our brain's way of understanding our movement and how we are moving in relation to everything else. Children who are perceived as clumsy or lazy may well be struggling with that sense. Interoceptive, state and emotion. This is the sense that tells us how we know when our tummy rumbles we're hungry, for example. The butterflies in our tummy tell us that we're nervous. And it's the sensations in the body that accompany emotion. Many neurodivergent children will feel this very keenly and may not be able to interpret what it is that they're feeling. So they may interpret it or translate it as pain, and it may otherwise cause them distress because they may not be able to understand why their tummy suddenly feels strange. They may interpret it, I'm going to be sick, even though it's what we would assume as just being butterflies because you're a little bit nervous or anxious. And finally, proprioception, which is your body's awareness. It's our body in the time and space they're in. For example, I know I'm sitting on a chair with my feet flat on the floor. I can sit still like that. I'm quite confident that my body is safe, and I know that it is secure. Children that struggle with that sense may rock constantly. They may be unable to sit still without supporting strategies in place because they're constantly unaware of stillness and how their body is reacting with everything around it. So they may appear to be stuck, or they may appear to be launching themselves from place to place, sort of hurtling. So the child that's hurtling down the corridor, for example, or along the landing almost head first, could well be having difficulties with their proprioception and body awareness. Another important thing to note is that children may be hypersensitive, which means that they're feeling all these sensations and senses in a heightened way, a magnified way, or they may be hyposensitive, so not registering sensation at all or only very faintly. And actually, they can also have a mixture of both depending on the sensory input. For example, they might dislike strong tastes due to hypersensitivity in taste, but may bump into you on a regular basis because they've got no proprioception. And so they're hypersensitive in that respect. For the purpose of tonight, we are going to be showing hypersensitivity, so magnified feelings, in red, and hyposensitive, so low sensitivity to things, in blue. Some aspects are both, so they will just be in black. And we will also look at some possible solutions to difficulties that are quite common. I've picked some of the ones that I have seen myself or I've heard about most often. It's a big subject. We can't cover every aspect of it in an hour, so I have had to cherry pick, if you will, to a certain extent. So one good rule of thumb overall is to become a detective. So exploring what the world might look like from your child's point of view. For example, if they're not sleeping, and it may be a sensory factor, what is their bedroom like at night? Do they have too many blankets or not enough blankets? Do they need that weight on them? What can you hear? And bear in mind that a child with hypersensitive hearing will hear things miles away. They'll hear a whisper downstairs. Even if you think you're being really, really quiet, they will still hear everything that you're saying. So it's about taking into account those extra sensitive things and trying to work out what it might be that's keeping them awake. Sensory processing challenges are broad. As I say, we can't fit every scenario in. So we're going to look at some suggestions, some scenarios, and sometimes there's a solution for more than one aspect. That so what might work for one aspect of sensory processing may actually work for the others as well. So it's worth, even though I might say, oh, this is to do with taste, it could do with hearing as well. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. Okay, so eating is a bit of a biggie, especially quite common is the one where food's touching. So the child expects things to be put separately on the plate. And that can cause some difficulties as well. A good tip for that one is, of course, to have the segmented plates, the little lunch boxes that slot together so that each bit of the lunch can go into different compartments and so on. So many neurodivergent people do actually find themselves labelled as fussy eaters, but it's not actually the case. It's quite simply that they are suffering from sensory overwhelm when presented with certain foods or certain textures or certain smells. Children that have amplified senses, so are hypersensitive, which is in red, will often have a very beige diet. It has been described as. And it has been suggested that part of that is because sight has a bearing on it as well. So colourful foods are quite overwhelming in a visual sense. So it's not always necessarily to do with the food itself, but the colour of the food. So the colours may be overwhelming, and less colourful foods are easier to handle. A common misconception amongst many, including some medical professionals, I'm sorry to say, who lack associated training, is that a child will eat eventually and not starve themselves. This is actually quite a dangerous viewpoint, because if a child is not eating due to sensory overwhelm, they will not eat what is in front of them. And speaking from a personal point of view, when my son was growing up, he would quite cheerfully have starved himself rather than eat something that he did not want to eat and he was never going to eat. It's also worth noting at this point that there is a condition called ARFID, which is avoidant resistant food intake disorder. This is extremely restrictive dieting. It's not to do with weight loss. It's not to do with image. It is to do with the restriction on the foods that they will eat. And if a child has an extremely restrictive diet, if they're not gaining weight or developing, it is vitally important to seek external help with that. There is a website called BEAT, B-E-A-T, that has a helpline and a wealth of information, and you have that on your useful websites handout as well. It is extremely important to seek medical advice if you feel that your child may fit into ARFID. It's something that has to be diagnosed by either a paediatrician or a psychologist. So if you are in any doubt at all, it's worth going to your GP to get a referral. And another factor that may be present is pica, which is where children and obviously when children are toddlers, they're exploring the world, they put things in their mouths, we dig them back out, and they grow out of it. Pica, on the other hand, is where children that are older will continue to do that. They will often eat it and swallow it. And pica itself refers to non-food items. So, for example, a child I've previously worked with would eat batteries on if he was allowed to. Obviously, there had to be hypervigilance around him to stop him putting things in his mouth that were non-food items. And this can only be resolved with professional treatment. So if you feel that your child fits into that category, again, please do seek medical help. So we can see there's the variety of different scenarios for those that are hypersensitive on the left and hyposensitive on the right. The children that may overfill their mouths, one good solution for that works quite well is that if you have a child that crams their mouth full because they can't sense when their mouth is full, and they are at risk of choking, if you give them an ice cold drink of some kind before they start eating, it somehow awakens the senses in the mouth, and it helps to prevent that overfilling. I'm not entirely sure why, because I'm not medically qualified, obviously, but several parents have related to me that that works really well. So that's one of the first tips for you, is the ice cold drink if your child crams. Okay, so working with food. When we're considering our children and eating, we do have options. It's not just about, oh, well, they'll only eat nuggets, I'll leave it at that. Obviously, without forcing the point, the first thing to consider, are there medical reasons? I'm sure we would all do that anyway. So, for example, does a particular food give a child a tummy ache? Could there be an allergy there that's making them feel unwell in some way? It's quite easy, especially if we're out for a family meal, or we feel as though our children should be eating a variety of things, to kind of get a little bit worked up, a little bit tense about what our child is eating. We want our children to eat a healthy diet. They're apparently refusing. So it can be quite a tense moment around the dinner table. However, it's really important to stay calm, pick your battles. If they will only eat that one thing, at least they've eaten something. And it's about trying different things, seeing what works, and persevering with it. And it's about not introducing a lot of things very quickly. So I've introduced a new food today. It's kind of went okay, so I'll probably introduce a new food tomorrow. Please don't. Just focus on that one success for now. Let the child get used to it, that it's a new thing, it's gone well. If they then turn it down again, they've tried it, that's a victory. And build up gradually. If we're trying new foods, try not to introduce new foods too frequently, unless the child expresses an interest in trying it, of course, in which case, go for it. And it's about exploring new foods. We don't have to put it on our mouths at this point. If we've got a very reluctant eater, we can explore it by just looking at it to begin with. They don't even have to go near it. They can look at it from a distance. And then when they're ready, they can touch it, see what it feels like. What does it smell like? And kiss it, just so that they can get that sensation against their mouth of what it might be like to be in their mouth. And then maybe they will feel confident enough to try a little nibble. It's about thinking about textures. So, for example, a child doesn't like carrots that are cooked. Perhaps they will eat them raw. Some children don't like very crunchy textures. Some children prefer mushy. Some children prefer the crunchy and not the mushy. So it's about working with observing what your child is eating, thinking about what it might have in common, and then working with that does my child always eat soft stuff without sauce or have sauce separately? And it's about working with those different combinations of type. So playing with food and making it fun. So these are, you know, fruit modelling, for example. The Feeding Plus website, which is in your useful information sheet, have got a wide variety. I've never seen such a large variety of ideas for playing with food. We always say, don't play with your food, eat it. But actually playing with food and making it fun takes that tension away, and it makes food less scary for children that are worried about what's going to happen if I put this in my mouth. And it's a way of familiarising with foods. You could even do a little bit of research and say, oh, mangoes come from wherever mangoes come from, and we can use those to make a really tropical picture, and you know, do a little bit of research, make it interesting, especially if your child is one of those fact finders that loves random facts and, you know, is looking things up all the time. Include food in that. And it's a language of choice. Let the child choose. Offer them the different choices, and when you're introducing those new foods, those new varieties of different foods, maybe set out 2 or 3 examples and say, which one would you like to explore today? Or even going back to the playing with food, which one shall we play with today? What do you think? And involving them in that choice of I've got choice over food. I don't have to eat it, but I can explore it. And it's cooking as well. The child may cook with you and never eat it, but it's getting them used to those textures, familiarising with the smells, maybe, you know, a tiny taste just to see what it's like, and so on. And you can make it into a game almost. Can the family guess what the mystery ingredient is in what we've just made? And it's about making it fun. Be careful with rewards, though. It would be quite easy to say, if you eat all that, you can have pudding. Oh, well, you haven't eaten it, so you can't have your pudding. I remember that from when I was growing up as well. I think many of us would. But it can add to the distress. It can add to the negative associations with particular foods. I have never been able to eat marrow, for example, even though I'm sure it's lovely, really, because I can remember being made to sit with marrow, which was like green slime on my plate, for ages and ages, and I wouldn't eat it, and I wasn't allowed to leave the table until I ate it. So a little bit careful around the language we're using with food. And the aim really overall is to make the eating pressure-free, and to make it fun and something to be celebrated rather than forced. And it's really about working with your child. And if your child ends up living on a diet of nuggets and waffles and they're healthy, then that's what we need to go with as well. Unfortunately, there is no way of changing a mindset. Okay, so we're on to touch. This is another area that's really quite common. So on the left, we've got our hypersensitive children. We can't stand to get messy. If something's a little bit sticky, we can't bear it until we've washed our hands, and we will become quite distressed until the thing that we don't like is taken away, until we've had a chance to wash our hands. We may not like to wash our hands, though, so that's where you get almost that double thing at play, that I don't like to wash my hands, but I don't like my hands being dirty either. They may refuse hugs. Again, as I said from the off, this isn't personal. It's just that if you've got hypersensitive to touch, a hug can be quite painful. So let them hug you, let them do it on their terms rather than forcing it. Very gentle touches. And similarly, they may be sensitive to certain types of clothing. The clothing may feel very tight. They don't like labels, the seams, and so on. It can feel itchy. It can feel as though it's stabbing them. It can feel as though it's rubbing them, and it's like being rubbed with sandpaper. It's really quite hard for them. So it's about finding those fabrics that your child will wear. School uniform, polo shirts can be quite a sticking point. Working with the school, let them wear t-shirts if that's what they're more comfortable with. And it's about working with the school so that, you know, the school knows that they've got these sensitivities. And most schools these days, I would hope, would be aware of it and make that reasonable adjustment. So they may hate crafts. You might think, oh, it's you know, children love to art and crafts and so on, but some children really do find it quite hard. So in these cases, it's worth having the bits and pieces around for crafting and letting them explore them gradually. So, you know, maybe starting off with a little bit of painting with a paintbrush, and then you know, if you want to do finger painting or so on, giving them the opportunity to try it if they want to, but it's not forcing it. Some children hate having baths or showers. They hate having their hair washed. It is about that bath being too hot or too cold. So we might perceive a bath as being really freezing cold, but they may say it's too hot, and it's the way they are perceiving it. And you know, we need to water play can be a good way of starting. As I said earlier, touch can be like a physical pain. We're going back to those hugs, the children that don't like a hug. It can be like a physical pain. They may be hostile to it. I can remember when I was a teaching assistant, there was a child I was working with, and at that point I didn't realise about this, and I just gave her a gentle touch on the shoulder and said, well done, when she got a question right in maths. And that was a big thing because she didn't like to speak up. So I was so pleased I should put my hand on her shoulder. Well done, Kate. And she went home and told her mother I'd hit her. And it's because that touch on the shoulder was perceived, because she was so sensitive, it was perceived that, you know, I'd been heavy-handed with her, even though it was just a gentle touch. So it can be really quite painful for them. And teeth brushing as well is a big one that I've come across. My younger son, funnily enough, my older son is obsessive about brushing his teeth. The younger son, not so much. And then we've got our hyposensitive, so those that have less sensation. They may be heavy-handed, breaking things. So again, they may be perceived as clumsy. They may squash, you know, sort of tread on the cat, okay, on a regular basis, because they've got no awareness of how close they are to the animal. They like a firm touch. They like that sensory squeeze. These are the children that like that weighted blanket, that really cocooning in a blanket, or in their duvet. They may tend to hug too hard. They will squeeze people. They will sit on people, not realizing that actually they may be hurting the person in question. And also they may have a very high pain threshold, so they're less likely to notice when they've hurt themselves. So it's, you know, worth being quite vigilant with children like that, so that we're aware of where they're at in terms of anything that they may have injured themselves on. Okay, so these solutions for tactile difficulties. So clothing, Our hypersensitive children would like it loose and not too tight, and our hyposensitive children would like it tight and not too loose. So many of us will have experienced the favourite go-to garment that has been outgrown or worn out, yet moving on results in meltdowns. We're not allowed to give old clothes to charity, perhaps, or hand me down to a younger relative, or get rid of it in any way. We can't throw it out, even though it's riddled with holes. So those are the garments that the child attaches themselves because they feel right, they're comfortable, they're in their comfort zone. In more general terms, it's worth considering when choosing clothes, seams and labels, as I said just now. Labels can be cut out or unstitched. A lot of companies are very aware of labels and seams now, which is really positive. Socks could be worn inside out. If you can't get seamless socks, they can be worn inside out so that that seam isn't rubbing against the toes and isn't doing the cheese grater effect. There is a lot of clothing out there that does take sensory processing into account. So, for example, Marks and Spencer's have got a sensory range. There are websites out there. It's worth shopping around because some websites do charge an awful lot of money, and you don't need to pay that for things when there is a cheaper option that is just as good. And again, it's working with the child to say, you know, what do you think of that? You know, you like Paw Patrol or My Little Pony or whatever, and it's worth working with the child, letting them help you choose their clothes. Again, as I said before, it's compromising with the school. It's a reasonable adjustment. And you have on your useful information sheet, you've got the Sensory Smart website, which has a wide range of ideas of different clothing and sources for those clothing. But as I say, it's really promising that a lot of these companies are now realising that some children do struggle with textures. Toothbrushing, as I said earlier, is a biggie. With my younger son, we discovered that the double-headed toothbrushes, which are soft and have a brush on both sides, so you're doing both sides of the tooth at the same time, which means you can do it more quickly and easily. They can be really good. He took well to those. And also something that my husband came up with that I didn't even know existed until then, is tooth powder rather than toothpaste, because it's a different texture. It doesn't have the squidginess of toothpaste, and it doesn't feel, toothpaste can feel as if it's burning. It's almost as though there's that burning sensation in the mouth and on the tongue. Tooth powder doesn't have that. So if your child won't take a toothbrush at all, whether it's a snazzy electric one with flashing lights or whether it's the double-headed toothbrush or whatever, a finger or a face cloth, whilst not being ideal, is better than complete refusal. And you can show them how to do it, and they can do it themselves so that they're in control of the amount of pressure that they're using on their own teeth and their own gums. Electric toothbrushes do seem to be more popular with children with neurodivergence, but and if they like a timer, you can get ones with timers as well. So it's about finding which combination works for your child. Okay, massage is there because actually, in terms of the cutting fingers and toenails, and hair washing, hair brushing, and so on, massage can do a lot. For cutting nails, it doesn't always work, but with many children it does. It's about gently massaging the ends of the fingers. I don't know if you can see that, before you cut them. And it helps to desensitize the ends of the fingers. With older children, Teaching them how to cut their own nails can help, because then again they've got that control over the sensations. They can see what they're doing, they know what they're doing, they can feel it at all, from all aspects. Hair washing and brushing, again, it's massaging the scalp gently but firmly, so almost like those scalpel, like gently squeezing the scalp. And that can desensitize enough to get a comb through quickly or a brush through quickly, or to wash their hair. Some children don't like the sensation of the water being on their face when their hair's being washed, and that can be why they don't like having their hair washed. So it's worth turning it round so that they're leaning backwards in some way, to wash their hair, to stop it going on their face. And in terms of brushing, spray conditioner can be quite helpful, because it eases the tangles before you've even begun. So getting them to gently run their fingers through their own hair before you brush it, after you've sprayed the conditioner on, can be quite helpful, because they're doing half the job with their fingers, and then you just need to do a little tidy up perhaps afterwards. Temperature is worth considering in just about every aspect, from food to water to clothing and so on. Whilst, as I said earlier, some children may think a bath is too hot when actually it's freezing cold, it's working with the child, letting the child adjust it, obviously making sure they're not putting all the hot water in, and potentially scalding themselves, because it can work the other way as well. With our hyposensitive children, they may not know that the water's too hot, but it's about adjusting and working with the child to explore water temperature and water safety and so on. And children that frequently go without a coat should be allowed to explore this. I know that's a bit of a controversial point of view. We worry about our children catching colds, but actually children with neurodivergence often are prone to a higher body temperature than neurotypical children. So overheating is a factor, and overheating can be a cause of distress, and that can then cause the child to become very heightened. So it's worth considering layers instead of straightforward jumpers and coats, bearing in mind whether that clothing needs to be tight or loose. And it can also apply to bedtimes and downtimes. Temperature in the bedroom can be really important as well. Some children like to cocoon and enjoy the tight hugs, and they'll benefit from blankets to wrap themselves in. And some children prefer to just have a sheet or nothing at all. And it's worth, again, working with your child on that. If you feel inclined to explore weighted blankets, to be fully effective, those should be roughly 10% of the weight of the child plus 1 to 2 pounds. And for children that refuse point blank to wash their hands, it's worth filling the wash basin with water, allowing them to play with it, or using hand gel instead. Quite often it's the sensation of the running water itself that causes the challenges, because again, if we've got hypersensitive skin, that water hitting our hand can be quite painful. So it's worth exploring the different options and exploring water play, hand gel, and so on. So out and about. So this refers to anything from going out, whether it's going on a trip to the shops, school run, or a more involved trip or a holiday. It can be like a military operation. But there are some good general rules that work well. So it's about keeping morning routines simple and consistent. Quite a good trick is to get everything ready the night before, so that you haven't got that panic in the morning, the battles about where's my uniform, where are my shoes, I haven't got my bag. work together with the child, lay the clothes out so that they can see where everything is. And for children that struggle with dressing, if they lay their clothes out in the order that they need to put it on, or have a picture list or a written list of the order as well, that can help. Inventing a song about dressing or seeing if you can beat the timer from yesterday can be quite effective. Excuse the dogs in the background. Can be quite effective at getting the child to get dressed and try and have that bit of independence. Getting dressed should feature on a visual timetable if that's what you use, and it's carried out at the same point every day. So we're going to avoid using time as a measure. For example, at 7:30 we get dressed. That's less likely to happen in school holidays or at the weekends. So it's best to just say we have got out of bed, we get dressed, or we got after washing, obviously. So weighted rucksacks and objects for our hyposensitive children can be quite useful in terms of if they are likely to run, jump, climb excessively. Remember our child from earlier that launches themselves along the landing and hurtles. The weighted rucksack or object will help with their proprioceptive senses. So it will help them stay grounded, if you like. It will help them make more sense of their own movements in relation to everything else and the consequences of that movement. So, for example, I put that foot forward, I'm moving forward, and so on, at the risk of oversimplifying it. It's also a really useful tool if they are becoming quite heightened. So the weighted rucksack, same as the weighted blanket, can be quite soothing for them because they've got that deep pressure. Planning days out in advance, almost doing that social story thing of exploring what's going to happen with your child in advance can be incredibly helpful because it takes away that anxiety and uncertainty about what they're likely to see, hear, and smell. Are there likely to be crowds? Many attractions these days do offer the opportunity to avoid queues. If you have a neurodivergent child, it's worth phoning the venue beforehand and to find out the details, as they're all different. Usually ID such as a GP letter or a DLA letter will suffice. And actually, as the child's carer, there may be options that you can get free entry because you're their carer as well. If a destination is crowded and they don't offer that option, frequent sensory breaks should be factored in so that your child can regroup. So it's watching for those cues that your child's becoming overwhelmed. So it could be that they're rocking or stimming in some way, such as flapping, vocal stims such as growling or whistling or humming. And those can all be signs that a bit of a break is needed. So it's getting to as quiet a place as you possibly can and just giving them a few moments, maybe with a sensory object or a favourite toy, just for a few minutes to help them re-regulate and come back down, if you will. And that can happen when they're overexcited or over happy, as well as when they're distressed. So it's not necessarily that they're becoming distressed, but they may be getting overstimulated generally. So hand gel features again, and this is our hypersensitive children, so those that are a bit more sensitive to things. Hand gel and wipes are our friends because public toilets can present huge challenges. Sounds of hand dryers, for example, they can be deafening, they can be distressing. Even the toilet flushing can be quite distressing for children with hypersensitive hearing. Radar keys are worth considering. You must make sure it's an official one, otherwise it potentially won't work. Some local authorities do give those away free. Otherwise, Disability Rights UK do sell them for £5. And on your handout, you have got a link to that and also a link to the toilet map, which is really handy whether you use a radar key or not, because it's a map of where every toilet in the UK is. Just think somebody did that. So don't be afraid to carry sensory kits. They don't have to be huge creative things. It can be just something as simple as a bit of bubble wrap in your bag, anything that the child likes to feel, you know, a blanket, a bit of blanket, bit of cloth. It can be anything. It can be just some bubbles that they can blow, because blowing is really good at calming and soothing. And even just a favourite toy. Be led by your child in terms of the contents, and be aware that they may change depending on circumstances. So what works now may not work in 3 weeks' time. So it's about observing what your child is being drawn to. Are they suddenly wanting soft fabrics where they didn't before, and so on. A longer journey or destination that's likely to involve crowds may include ear defenders or earplugs. You can get some really good noise cancelling earplugs now where they can still hear if somebody's talking to them directly, but it drowns out that background noise. A soft blanket perhaps for the journey. Hypersensitive children will like to feel that and stroke it. Hyposensitive children may cocoon themselves in it. So obviously it's worth making sure that that's breathable fabric. And paper, sitting on a piece of paper, and I have no idea why it works, but it does, can be incredibly effective for children that are prone to motion sickness. Some science behind that does suggest that it's because paper is a relatively slippery surface. So in order to sit comfortably on it in a moving vehicle, requires some movement to avoid being thrown around. So the natural tendency as your bottom slides to the left is to lean to the right, and thus producing banking of the head either way, which is essential to avoid travel sickness. And that's all to do with your vestibular senses as well. So that would tie in with the sensory processing as well. So a little bit of science. How true it is, I don't know, but having carried out many school trips, I can vouch for the fact that, yes, it does work. Okay, as I said at the beginning, it's worth remembering that, you know, when you're working with a neurodivergent child, when you're parenting, you're doing your best, you feel as though the world's against you sometimes, it's worth remembering that we matter too. So there are some self-soothe techniques that we can use on ourselves anywhere we like, because they are very discreet, that can help calm us in the moment and help us to stay that little bit more zen when our child is perhaps being a bit more challenging for us. And it can also help children as well. So it's something that in calmer moments you can try together and explore what your child likes, what you like, what's likely to work for them and for you when things are getting a little bit more tricky. So hand massage, as I say, we don't really have to make a big thing of it. It is what it says on the tin. We can start, we just start with our thumb, and we're just rubbing the palm of our hand with our opposing thumb. And it's about working our way up the fingers and just taking the time to really go over every part of the hand, especially the ball of the thumb. Okay, you can apply as much or as little pressure as you like, which is really nice for our children that may find touch painful, or those that really need that deep pressure. And if you wish, you can use hand cream to do it as well. And then you just move to the other hand and so on. It's amazing, once you've tried that, how much tension has gone. It's amazing how much tension we hold in our hands. So it's worth taking the time. And we can do that standing at the bus stop. We can do that sitting at the dinner table. We can do it anywhere, because nobody will particularly take any notice of somebody that's rubbing their hands. Self-hug. This is very good for children that don't particularly take to being hugged. So all it is, it's literally, again, what it says on the tin, it's crossing your arms over, going for shoulder to shoulder, and just squeezing. Holding it for a few seconds, and then just relaxing. And then repeat the other way. And then when you feel ready, just have a nice stretch outwards or upwards, whichever direction you like. And stretch backwards so that your chest is coming forward and your shoulders are back, and then just relax. And you can almost feel that that tension has then gone. Stretching is an incredibly good way of releasing tension and stress and that bubbly feeling that children might feel when they're starting to just get to that point where they're going to flip their lid. White rain noise, I won't play the whole thing because it goes on forever. Okay, so that or similar noises. Shh, hush. There we go. That or similar noises, it's determined it's not going to stop. It's a lot less soothing when it won't stop when you want it to. Okay, we'll just leave that in the background for now. So it can be quite soothing to have noises like that. The white noise as well, you can get apps that have got just white noise on it, and that can be quite soothing as well. When external noise becomes too much, but the silence is too much too, and that can be, you know, the silence can hurt as much as too much noise sometimes. And mindfulness, which is living in the present moment. And that can be useful for children, especially if they experience high levels of anxiety. For example, those on the route to school. Note what you can see and wonder about it. Challenge them to find things like, oh, can we find 4 red cars? And it's quite useful for us too, because you're focusing on that present moment. You know you've got to find those 4 red cars. You're not thinking about anything further down the road. You're just focusing on finding the 4 red cars. And in a world that's very busy, that can be really helpful. And it can be helpful for grown-ups too, for everybody. One thing, for example, when I'm driving to work, I'll try and notice at least one new thing each time so that I'm not thinking about the day ahead too deeply. I'm taking that time to just focus on the here and now. And actually that sounds as though it's taking time, but it actually gives you back time. And you're more relaxed, so things get done more efficiently as well. And it can be incredibly helpful if you are prone to overthinking, or if your child's prone to overthinking. It's just a question of watching the thought go past, not blocking it out, but just watching it go past, acknowledging it, and then focusing on something here and now. You know, like a fingernail or just something that happens to be in the room with you. Right, that brings us to the end of the webinar. So thank you very much for listening to me waffle on. If you wish to contact us at all, our email address is there, and the web address and the phone number. I'll leave that up for a moment just in case anybody needs it. Okay, and please do take a moment to scan the QR code if you've got a phone that you can scan it with. We do find your comments and observations really useful. So we would thank you if you do take part in, the survey. The survey, you will notice, is largely aimed at settings, but hopefully you will feel able to make your views known as well. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see more of you, and then we'll go into the questions and answers. My apologies that I did run over somewhat on that part, but hopefully we'll get your questions answered nonetheless. Okay. Right. Hello, Jackie.
Hello again.
What have we got?
We've got a few things. First of all, I did say that a couple of people have asked about handouts and whether the recording is going to be available and how. So both of those things, handouts and the recording, and also certificate of attendance.
Ah, right. Yes, Jessie, thank you very much. I've seen your message. I hope you enjoyed it. Right, so the handouts I sent to the team at the mental health team. So hopefully those will be sent out to you. If they're not, it's worth emailing them and asking for them. One of them being the sheet that I mentioned that's got it's got links to the videos that I've shown you tonight. It's got some helpful websites on there and so on. So it's worth emailing them and making sure you get that. Certificate of attendance, I don't know about again. I'm going to pop the contact details back up, if you'll bear with me a moment, so that you can see who to contact. I will continue speaking while I'm doing so.
I also took note of a few comments and a few questions that came into the chat.
Right. Okay. So just getting back to that screen. Okay, I'm going to continue talking while that screen is up. In terms of certificates and the handouts and so on, if you email the email address that's currently on the screen, they will be able to tell you about that. What was the other thing, Jackie? It was certificates, handouts, and
the recording.
The recording, yes. The recording is going to be sent to everybody that registered, I'm told. So once again, if you don't receive that, it's worth dropping them an email to find out.
You asked me to remind you to stop recording when it was...
Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad I asked you to do that. If I can see how. There we are.